And welcome back, my friends. Welcome. And it's been a while that I've done a video like this. I'll explain a little bit more about that at the end of the video. But the topic for today is there a possibility that the faith community out there globally can move past the boundaries of their own individual belief systems and try and come to maybe a more inclusive perspective? Are the boundaries stopping the world from evolving? You know, I'm not saying that the boundaries were never supposed to be there or there was no use to them, but I'm looking at it from kind of an evolution of the human race kind of thing, and thinking, are we moving past that a little bit now? From a humanistic perspective, possibly? And another question related is there a demographic of people out there who could be involved in this kind of progression? I think so. I think there is. And there's a lot of you out there. I'm hoping this video is going to find just spiritual people who are not necessarily looking to affiliate themselves dogmatically with any one denomination or religion. And you're out there. I know you're out there, and I'm going to show you some stats which to me seem quite conclusive that there's a big chunk of these people. Let me also say to anyone who is watching this channel because they think that it's from a Christian viewpoint, it is still. I do still, I identify as Christian. It's a biblical term. I can't remember the verse now, but it says Christians were, the followers of Jesus were first called Christians in Antioch. So I'm not averse to the label Christian, but it does seem to carry a lot of baggage, doesn't it, with that term? But anyway, I digress. If people are Christian watching this, or of the biblical persuasion, then let me assure you that nothing I'm going to say in this video, and nothing I believe I've said in my previous videos, has got anything to do with departing from the biblical narrative. I'm still a massive fan of the biblical narrative. It's simply a matter of interpretation, There are a lot of different interpretations out there, and it's about selecting an interpretation for me at the moment, from my view, that is more inclusive maybe than other interpretations. And that's my interest at the moment, is to have the boundaries of dogmatism and creedalism and people kind of being a bit strict in the rules of what you should and shouldn't believe. That's what I'm trying to move away from, and trying to move more towards maybe promoting what is more important than beliefs, which is, number one, what the New Testament pretty clearly prioritizes, which is just to be a good person. Treat others as you wish to be treated. That's obvious, okay? And I think there isn't a world religion out there which does not believe to do that, which is very encouraging to me. It shows me that God's kingdom is alive in the world, and it infuses all kinds of belief systems. It makes me think that we're living in the kingdom on a broader scale than just confining it to one particular religion. Okay? Now, having said that, let's have a look at the stats. Okay? Now, some people, I just want to have a look at how the spiritual landscape is kind of looking in 2025. And there seems to be a move away from institutionalized religion. But a lot of people might say, well, yeah, I mean, atheism's just going rampant at the moment. But there's interesting nuances to these statistics. These people may not just be atheists. So let's have a look at some stats from just last year. It's an American study, okay, but it's a good petri dish, America, I think, for these things. So this is done by Pew Research Center, and it's a US survey, as mentioned, but you know, I've had a look at other Western countries, and they're following suit. Okay, so the religiously unaffiliated make up the fastest growing group in surveys asking Americans about their religious identity. So they are non-affiliated to a religion. They're affectionately termed nuns. All right, N-O-N-E-S, nuns. They don't have a religion. That's what they say. And it's currently at 28%, which is second after Protestant. It's bigger than Catholics in America. So it's quite a large chunk, I think. And there have been deeper questions to try and figure out where they're coming from. And I'm speaking to you now. I think you might be watching these people who are non-affiliated to religion, but are feeling something. So let's take a look at the deeper kind of next level of it. And so out of that 28%, there are some who describe themselves as atheists, okay, or agnostic. But most actually say nothing in particular. You know, they wouldn't go as far as to say that they don't believe in God or anything that or they're not open to the idea. They'd just rather say nothing in particular. That only 17% say that they are atheist. So it looks like from this that 83% are somewhat spiritual or open to spirituality. So I see a lot of you spiritual folks out there. Yeah? There seems to be like a spiritual fifth column out in the wilderness, kind of roaming around, maybe who are somewhere along their journey. So the potential is there, but the figures are moving more away from people maybe being born into a religion and sticking with it. A lot of people are moving out of that, moving away from labels, okay? You know, quite a large chunk there are open to spiritualism, I would say, from that pie chart, all right? Now, most of these nuns believe in God or a higher power, but not in a biblical God, right? So believe it. If you look at that top one there, believe in a higher power, 56%. But I'm absolutely flabbergasted that 13% of them actually believe in the God described in the Bible. So there's some guys out there who are very interested in the Bible, and they actually believe in the God of the Bible, but they're religiously unaffiliated, which, you know, we need to kind of understand why they prefer to be religiously unaffiliated even though they believe in the God of the Bible. And that huge chunk that believes in another higher power, well, it could be true that they have looked very carefully at the Bible as well, these people. So it's not just straight up atheists, is it? And on the bottom graph there, it's just showing about attendance at services. So as you'd expect, very little of these nuns go to religious services. And by the way, just going up to the top one again, even people who are religiously affiliated, there's a big chunk that don't believe in God there. Okay, and you might think, how does that work? Well, I mean, I can give you a perfect example. My dad definitely identifies and he's affiliated with Judaism, but for him, it's just a tribal thing. It's a cultural thing. He doesn't. If you asked him about God, he'd be indifferent, and might even just say, "No, I don't really believe in God. I just like my Judaism." You know, he goes to synagogue every week. He does his social stuff. He goes like for the big feasts. He might turn up at his synagogue. Doesn't have to. He's not massively big about it, but it's just his thing. Always has been. Right. So that's why you get religiously affiliated people who don't believe in God. Okay. So that was kind of surprising to me. So you're out there, you guys are spiritual, you believe in a higher power, not necessarily the God of the Bible, but there are a fair chunk of you that do believe in the God of the Bible, but you still describe yourself as religiously unaffiliated. Okay. You know, a massive 56% of nuns believe in a higher power. All right? Just think about that for a second. It's interesting, right? It's not surprising that nuns don't really go to religious gatherings, but they're thinking on these things. They're thinking on them. There's a small percentage there, so maybe they've gone and had a look and are like, it's not really my scene. Yeah? Now, this next graph, I mean, this proves that you guys are spiritual out there. You nuns. You're spiritual. Half of nuns say that they are spiritual, or spirituality is very important to them. Right, that's half of them. So a third of people in America are religiously unaffiliated. Out of those, like more than 80% believe in a higher power or even the God of the Bible. And then half of them just straight up say that they are spiritual people. So you guys are out there. But you want nothing to do with religion. So we could term you guys spiritual but not religious, or SBNR is the abbreviation for it. It's a thing, spiritual but not religious. So what are the reasons that you guys don't want to go to religious gatherings or be affiliated with a religion? Okay. Let's take a look at that. 60% cite that they question a lot of religious teachings, right? Question a lot of religious teachings. Now, I've got Christian friends out there who will be watching this and saying, hello, same over here, and I'm not sure about going to religious meetings either, and maybe in 5 or 10 years I may not be even identifying myself as Christian because of all the baggage and everything. So, and then we had that chunk, didn't we, who believe in the God of the Bible. So are there many people who have actually come out of the Christian religion and are now identifying as nuns? See, traditional Christians might find that as not encouraging, but I'm actually seeing us evolving out of, how can I say, an age of traditionalism that may have had its function, but definitely mistakes were made in that time. Obviously, wasn't it? Because we had crusades, right? And killing over beliefs and whatnot, and wars. But there may have been a godly function to it, but maybe we're coming out of that. Yeah? So they question a lot of the religious teachings. And if we look at some of the other reasons, they don't like religious organizations. That might have something to do with the religious teachings, right? They don't see a need for religion in my life. Well, if you don't agree with the teachings, then you're not going to want it as part of your life. Bad experiences with religious people. Maybe because they believe in a teaching in things you don't agree with. And, you know, it's all kind of interrelated, isn't it? To religious teachings. So, what are the religious teaching kind of pain points? Yeah? We need to have a look at some core religious teachings. And all I can tell you, as mentioned, is that there is great variance on interpretations of the Bible which give us, we have standard teachings, traditional teachings, we have the orthodox teachings, okay, but we also have a wide variety out there of Christian teachings. So I want to encourage all of you spiritual but not religious folk out there, that there are many who would still label ourselves as part of a religion that have a lot more in common with you than you might think. Okay, so let's have a look at one. You don't believe in hell, or, you know, the concept of hell and all of this stuff. You're spiritual, you believe in a higher power and even God of the Bible, but you don't want to believe in this hell stuff. Don't worry. You know, tons of Christians don't either. There is a very diverse set of opinions, all right, about what hell means and who goes there. Okay? Does it even apply to us and our future? Some say no, not at all. And again, we're not departing from the biblical narrative. All I'm doing is we have different interpretations of it. And I think a very valid one, it can be argued that the word hell shouldn't even be in our Bible. It translates multiple different words, original words in their original language. And the baggage that comes with it, to be quite honest, is straight up scaremongering. It's extortion, basically. Are we supposed to extort faith out of people by threatening them with endless fiery torment or total annihilation from the presence of God if you don't believe XYZ from a really difficult book that's hard to work out, and that even Christianity has multiple different views of? We don't need that dogma. And a growing number of Christians, I can tell you, are shedding it after looking at it a bit more closely. And we are not departing from the biblical narrative by doing so. So we have this in common with you, spiritual folks out there. You don't need to believe in hell to follow the biblical narrative. There is an interpretation and it's very valid, okay? And there are church fathers back in the day who had this angle as well, okay? I have made a video on this if you want to go back to my Hell a Closer Look video, okay? Now, the prophecies. Oh, all the prophecies. Yeah. The prophecies don't make sense. Well, just let me say, Christians can't agree on what the prophecies mean, okay? And when they were or are to be fulfilled. So, yes, the majorities of Christians will have a lot of upheaval and chaos, yet future for us. So a lot of chaotic stuff. It's not a nice thing to think about, is it? Like worldwide, global chaos on an epic biblical kind of scale. But a growing number are starting to realise that so much, if not all, prophecy has already been fulfilled. It's already happened. It's called preterism. It's worth looking into. Personally, the biblical narrative made like 200% more sense when I started leaning that way. So it's not all doom and gloom, people. It's not all doom and gloom. That's not how all of us look at it. That the world's getting worse and worse, and then Jesus is going to call a stop to it by, exploding the earth one day. No, there is a different interpretation. There's many different interpretations, but the one I like at the moment is that most of that doomsday stuff was aimed at the end of the Old Covenant age, and it was using a lot of hyperbole, a lot of poetic language that we don't need to take literally, and we don't need to take it into our future. So it doesn't address us today, really. It's meaningful for us, but we don't need to be standing at the door ready for that kind of thing happening. So we stand with you spiritual folks on that one as well, that's all. It's not believable that that's in our future. Now, I could add here that some people don't think the Bible jives with science, especially regarding the Genesis creation account. So, you could say that the Bible doesn't make sense with science, as well as like prophecy and all of that. But That's okay too. That's fine. You know, yes, most Christians will tell you the earth is 6,000 years old, and you've got your science stuff behind you that says that just cannot possibly be. But there is a growing body of scholarship that doesn't actually, we don't need to put a 6,000 year timeline on it, because we don't start the clock at the book of Genesis. It's called covenant creation, and it's mainly arguing that the Genesis account is simply talking about the creation of the old covenant, and it's using physical things, and it's God naming everything and dividing things in a covenant for covenant purposes. It's not saying that's when God actually created the physical universe. Now, that's a complicated matter, and you could have a look at that, but you can have the old earth argument. There you go. we give it up. We don't need it. We don't need it. So if that's a blocker for you, we have different interpretations that we could talk about for that, whilst still sticking to excuse me, the big biblical narrative, which again I stress I'm not veering from. It's just different interpretations. You don't want to conform to other dogmas. That's fine. Neither do I. You know, many Christians will be dogmatic on what they consider to be critical doctrines in order to label yourself as Christian. But all this causes is followers of Jesus shedding themselves of that tag altogether. And when these surveys are done, they will often just say, I'm spiritual but not religious. They don't even want to be called a Christian. Like, I wouldn't take myself that far at the moment, but who knows in the future? Because the word Christian, it does kind of, it evokes a certain kind of Christianity where it's perceived as being that group of people who say you have to be in our group or this is going to happen to you, right? There is always that in or out of the club, and if you're out, then you get fire and all that. So many Christians might be calling themselves spiritual and not religious. You know, we're with you, spiritual people, because they don't like that people have made Jesus into a religion. Yeah. They don't like that he's been kind of weaponized. Jesus didn't come to make a religion. He came to make the world a better place to live in physically. Everyone loving each other and treating each other well. This is not just a heaven thing. Jesus cared deeply about life on earth, you know. He came to make the world a better place. He came to show us God's character in action, teaching us that love conquers all. He didn't come to establish creeds and systems of belief and a religion, like you're in or out of the club. Do you know what I mean? So, us Christians in the wilderness, can I say, like, we may be going through this transformative process where we're actually leaning towards the position that beliefs should not be so dogmatically forced on us by the church It's almost like the church that's like coming from a very boundary orientated point of view, and we're looking to shed the boundaries. So that form of the church, we now want to move on to the next bit where we're kind of more universal, and we don't have to have, because it's almost like people treat their church and even their church building as the new temple. Do you know what I mean? They make that the important thing, where I'm saying it's all about our conduct. It's all about driving forward humanistically to make the world a better place, and boundary-driven thinking is not conducive with that. And again, I know you've got your verses, people out there who disagree. Jesus said he came with a sword. I think we need to have a closer look at verses like that, and I'm quite happy to, in the comments, that had a function and a purpose, that kind of statement from Jesus, and it was mainly to do with the end of the old age in the first century. So us Christians in the wilderness going through this transformative process and kind of joining with you spiritually but not religious folk out there, there's amazing conversations that we can start having. We should have the freedom to ask questions, which you don't get in church, do you? You can't ask questions in church that go against the prevalent view, otherwise you just get chucked out. It's happened to me. It's happened to many of us. They don't like you bucking authority. They don't like you holding any views that they deem to be unorthodox. They just don't like you asking a lot of questions at all. Okay? But we should be having the freedom to ask those questions, and it's going to have to be in another way. And we do have very good conversations online in various Facebook groups, and maybe that's the vehicle where we move out of this traditionalism, as less and less people want to go to church now. And other religions too. Less and less Jews want to go to synagogue. Less and less Muslims want to go to their mosques. People feel the spirit, but they don't feel the boundary-driven thinking. Do you know what I mean? And I think the kids are clever these days, you know? Kids are not dumb. Kids are growing up, looking at institutionalized religion and thinking, nah, aren't they? So we should have the conversations without the threat or without the fear of being ostracized. So you don't want to conform to dogmas, that's no problem. I haven't got no dogmas for you. Not a single one that you need to believe in. So you can't accept, some of you out there, the exclusive nature of religion, and that's great, you know, and that is possibly the best news ever, that there is a brand of Christianity, although 90% of Christians would say, oh, that's just heresy, that takes the position of universal maybe not reconciliation, but universal alignment with God that has already been established in the world today and for the last couple of thousand years. Okay, so And what it basically means is that God will align all people, each and every one of us, to himself sooner or later, so that we can know it. I mean, we already are, but he will raise all of our understanding. That's his desire. He's powerful enough to do it, and his will is strong enough to accomplish that feat. Okay? And as for specific beliefs, if any of us, right, and that includes Christians, if any of us have got something wrong, then we can be taught about that in God's own good time. There's nothing stopping God from doing that when we physically die also. You know, you're spiritual, but you're not religious, right? You probably believe in an afterlife then, don't you? That we're not just this flesh body, we're a spirit. Why can't God teach us when we reach the spiritual realm if we've got any little particulars wrong, right? God is no respecter of persons. We don't need a grade A in Christianity or a grade A in Islam or a grade A in Buddhism. You know, it's not about reaching that ultimate when we're down here trying to earn a daily crust and survive and deal with all the other life stuff that we've got going on, right? We don't need to, at the same time, study the Bible and get all of our doctrines all in a row and make sure that we're 100% correct on everything. How can we know that? You know? So we don't need that. We don't need to ace Christianity to be at peace with God. There are Christians who could be totally wrong about God. We're at each other's throats constantly, right, calling each other heretics. The Buddhist living next door probably has a better handle on God than some Christians, me included. Right? I'm a heretic in at least 5 different ways. All right? I know Unitarians who say that they've got more in common with Muslims than they do with Trinitarians. So you can see why people are leaving church buildings in droves, right? Either you're getting kicked out for having non-standard doctrines, or you just can't take the hypocrisy or sheer nonsense, frankly, of what is going on in churches today. Now, I might personally diverge from people that label themselves as universalists and believe that maybe like that all spiritual paths are correct and truth. I think universal Unitarians might believe that from what I can see. I'm not sure though. So someone can correct me on that if I'm wrong. But what I'm saying is that we are all fallible people who are wrestling with many ancient texts, and systems. And if any correction needs to be done, then God can handle it. In this life or the next life. Okay? Anyway, look, I don't want this to go on too long. So in summary, let me just say personally that I believe we're evolving for the better. And people will often counter this with, oh, but look at the world today. It's a terrible place with all this pollution and crime and evil and corrupt governments who just want to control people and get up to all their conspiracies, right? And I'm not denying that there is this kind of thing going on. Okay, I've been down the conspiracy research rabbit hole, okay? My fair share. I know that there is some lengths that powerful people will go to advance their schemes. All right, but my view is that that is actually a testimony of how far we've come as humanity, that they have to go to these intricate lengths, right, in order to start their wars. I mean, do you think that Nebuchadnezzar or Darius or the Caesars needed to devise complicated stories and sell them to the public to get support and pretext for their wars? Of course not. If they had the inkling to go off and take over another country, they just went ahead and did it. Yeah, they didn't need any excuses. They just took their huge armies and went on a murderous campaign, right, throughout the entire continent, killing everyone that they ran into. Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. Would you rather your kids grew up in today's world or thousands of years ago when barbarian hordes were marching around doing just unspeakable acts? Yeah, you think crime is bad in your city? You know, getting stabbed to death for whatever was in your pockets, that was an hourly occurrence in the Dark Ages, right? You know, we're not living in that world anymore, okay? As for like pollution and crime and homelessness, well, if we all started treating each other as children of God, right, rather than being boundary driven and thinking, well, my group's the good one, and everyone else is like, even when they do good things, it's not from the right motive or whatever. We need to move away from that. We got to ground ourselves in respect and patience and love for our fellow citizens, right, of the earth. Instead of trying to convince people that certain beliefs that we ourselves may have totally wrong are the way to go. Do you think that would move us forward if we, you know, I know of many groups of outreach people in Christianity that just help people, and they don't really get much into evangelizing. They don't really get into that. They just help people. They help homeless people. They help poor people. They help try and solve problems in their community. And they may be Christian, or they may be even like Muslim, Jewish, whatever. But the goal is to simply help people rather than try and change their mind on theological issues. So that's what I'm thinking at the moment. That I know that there are spiritual people out there. I know that you don't want to tag yourself with any particular group, which is fine. As I've said, I can only really speak from a Christian perspective, but I know that there's many Christians who have been saying to me in groups, like, I don't even know if I call myself a Christian anymore, because I'm finding that I have very little in common with Christians now. So there's a shift, definitely away in Christianity, away from the institution. And I think that that's fantastic, personally. I know many people will say, well, that's just a sign of it's the end of days. Like, this is the great tribulation's coming up next, because now we've seen all the signs that people are moving away from the faith that they were given. But that all happened in the first century. It did happen. And what we're seeing now is more like people in general don't want to get involved in a big rule book, but they want to just be good people, which is what most people are. You know, like I could go out now and have a stroll around and bump into 100 people and they'll all be decent people. People are generally decent, and that's what we have today in 2025. If you take out the super crooks and the super corrupt politicians who have to devise more complicated and devious plans to get themselves more rich and powerful, if you take away that very, very small amount of people and the limited wars that we're having at the moment, we just got to thank God that we've progressed and that kind of war doesn't expand into something huge these days. Even a regional war does not tend to go into a world war now, and I can't really see that happening anymore. So that's my thoughts on all this stuff. I do see evolution there, spiritual evolution, and it's not a tiered thing. Like, it's not, oh, I'm more evolved than you or whatever. It's just a stage of consciousness, really. I don't look upon someone who doesn't think about any of these things as beneath me or lower than me, and I don't think we should. It's just everyone has their stages, everyone has different things going on in their life, but everyone knows good from bad, and as long as they kind of follow that, then they shouldn't have any more to worry about, like complicated doctrines and dogmas and people trying to force that on them anymore. All right, that's it for that. It does seem like ages since I've done a video like this. I have been working on a documentary series, and I did a couple of, it's about 70 AD. And I just wanted to get that off my chest because I've been thinking about it for a while, but that's just my bit for raising awareness about what happened in 70 AD. So, and thanks for all the useful comments, by the way, on those. I did do a couple of responses to full preterists who believe in the annihilation view. Like, that was my position before, but now I'm just continuing to question that. I think God loves all people. I think he wants all people to be aligned to him, and I don't think that he's going to fail in what he wants or what he wills. Great. We've also reached 50 subs, which I think is really encouraging. And again, thanks everyone for the comments. If you've got any comments, like, I know there's always people that are going to say, yeah, but what about the verse? No problem. I'm happy to discuss that in the comments. So drop a comment down there. And we can talk about it, because there's no problem with having conversations, is there? We can have these conversations and it's perfectly good and there's no judgment. And I like the whole online community, you know, because some of us don't have a lot of choice with churches for these very reasons that I'm talking to you about. So online is great, and it allows for a broader conversation with many people of diverse faith types. So anytime you want to drop a comment, I always try and read them and I always try and respond. All right, thanks everyone, and I will see you in the next one.